I attended her Class 1 hearing and was struck by the climate in the room during what was meant to be a fair and unbiased hearing. Throughout the hearing, particularly while the deliberations were being made for the final outcome, several of the witnesses, as well as their friends, were laughing and joking with a level of gleefulness completely inappropriate for the heavy nature of the proceedings. By the nature of their actions and their mannerisms, it was clear they were happy about the way it had gone, and there was a cold joy, almost malice, regarding the outcome, which did not seem favorable for first-class Burns. Their behavior was extremely disrespectful to both first-class Burns, as well as the traditions and solemn nature of the proceedings. Each of these individuals were known members of the Genesis Council, as was one of the individuals closely involved in condemning and being actively against first-class Burns on numerous occasions. There is a clear connection between each of these individuals and a motive to slant opinions against first-class Burns because of the camaraderie within the group. Their motivation was based on camaraderie with the individual that reported and began the investigation, and not based on creating a fair and just hearing regarding the situation. It can also be drawn from this that there was significant bias against first-class Burns in the situation, and that because of this, the witness statements may have been construed in a way that played deliberately against first-class Burns. The idea that this bias and gleeful malice may have had a significant impact in the proceedings is disconcerting to say the least, and had an air of premeditation to it, as if they had gotten what they wanted.
Today is 16 July, 2021, and this cadet is my daughter, one of two at the United States Coast Guard Academy. And apart from the burning at the stake, this description is not hyperbole. Just weeks before what was supposed to be a proud and magnificent end to a 4-year journey at the Academy, and a personal milestone over a decade in the planning, my daughter was subjected to an Inquisition fueled by fraud and vindictiveness that led directly to her disenrollment. Accused and fraudulently found guilty of sexual misconduct for action that had no sexual, intimate, or physical components, completely counter to and ignoring the very rules and regulations governing the Academy and the Corps of Cadets, and without any regard for her and her accused accomplices' consistent and vehement insistence that they had no such relationship or encounters. This video is mine and mine alone. As a father, as an American, and as a combat veteran, I claim my right to be ashamed and angry at the inhuman turpitude, the malicious character, and cowardly dishonor that comprises the iniquitous leadership at one of my country's military academies. This sort of malfeasance and corruption is shocking and should not happen to any young person willing to step forward in service to our country, and it represents the cancer of character that is infecting our social fabric. This story is long, but detailed, supported by evidence, the regulations, and the truth. Contact information is provided at the end for anyone who makes it that far and who finds this story as disgusting as it is sad. Let this story be a warning to anyone and any parents with young men and women thinking about applying or accepting an appointment to one of our military academies. They have become cesspools of depravity, illegality, and immorality. So I've been wanting to reach out for a while now just to tell you the whole story personally, but it's just been a real difficult couple of months. I mean, I've been working on this from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, and that assumes I'm going to bed. But it's just been a brutally sad story. I mean, For anyone to have spent so much time preparing and working for acceptance into such an august institution to be so casually and fraudulently just tossed aside, it's just hideous. It's disgusting, really. It's just another example of the systemic cancer we're seeing more and more every day. All right, let me just start with a relatively quick overview of the complete story. I just want to get out the full picture. I'm not going to argue every point or defend every rebuttal. We'll get into all that in a few minutes, but I wanted you to see the big picture of the what's and the who's involved in the basic timeline. So after returning to the academy for the spring semester this year, 2021, Zara is continuing to mentor and counsel a fourth class cadet that had been dealing with some serious struggles, both in her personal life and as she adjusted to life at the academy as a cadet. Zara and this fourth class cadet were also sponsor sisters. They originally met over dinner at their sponsor family's home, which again I'll discuss in more detail later. In February, Zara was brought up on report generated by a cadet, specifically the fourth class roommate to the fourth class cadet Zara was mentoring, and more obscurely, a supporting group of cadets, and I'll get into that more. Now, this report concerns specific behavior that Zara was accused to have engaged in a month prior, in mid-January. The originating fourth class cadet reported to another cadet of what she perceived to be inappropriate and by extension offensive, unprofessional behavior by Zara and her fourth class roommate, and of which she is supposed to have witnessed. It's important to point out that being a month after the fact, we've been able to determine and certainly intellectually and factually argue that the genesis of this was specifically not Zara's behavior, but that there was a broader spectrum of animosity and frustration between the fourth class roommates, and Zara's involvement on the night in mid-January got mixed into these frustrations and then grew into a specific individual report against Zara. Now, the very idea of an inappropriate relationship is predominantly sexual or intimate. While there are some finer lines where even social interaction, recreational interaction with the lower classes can be considered unprofessional or inappropriate, this was most definitely about an inappropriate, intimate relationship. And in fact, the primary charge of which she was found guilty in her administrative hearing was in fact sexual misconduct. With that charge in place, other charges such as lack of respect, lack of devotion to duty, etc. are added to the charge, mostly as supplementary charges, as they have no merit if not for the primary charge. So in a nutshell, she was disenrolled for sexual misconduct. And what's terribly sad about this whole story from a personal standpoint is that this is simply fraud. Zara never had an intimate relationship with this cadet, and through this entire process, both cadets, Zara and the fourth class with whom she was accused, vehemently denied this relationship, or at least the characterization of this relationship, as in any way improper. Now, as I've said, it seems like 1,000,000 times already, this is a very difficult story to tell, because everyone just naturally assumes that if the cadets are arguing they did not engage in sexual misconduct, they're kids, right? Who make dumb young adult mistakes all the time, right? Well, they must have been doing something close enough to, or at least in some way, clearly and unambiguously inappropriate. And for most folks, that might mean anything from cuddling, petting, touching, to outright sex, right? I mean, there must be something there, right? No one gets disenrolled from an academy, especially a military academy, if there isn't at least something there. And that something is then that thing that the kid is arguing might be debatable or subjectively debatable, right? But no, there was nothing. There was no intimate contact, no physical contact, and certainly no sexual aspect to their interaction. But they did sit on the same bed. No shit. That's the core. They were counseling, talking while sitting on the same bed. As it happens, it was a high bunk, what they call a lofted rack, like the high bed of a set of bunk beds, but just no bed underneath. Why the bed? Well, have you ever seen a military academy's cadet rooms? There's one office chair for each cadet and a bed. That's it. I mean, this is not your civilian college type cozy room from home decorated kind of room. It's very Spartan. And keep in mind, it's well after the duty day. Most cadets are doing their homework. In fact, the 4th class roommate was there all along, not more than 8 feet away at her desk doing homework. And it's around a little before 2200 when Zara first shows up. And sure, Zara admits at some point, sitting with her back against the wall, that she laid over on her elbow, and as the discussion progressed, certainly they adjusted and changed positions occasionally. But let's be clear, this wasn't 2 cadets cuddling in bed. This was 2 cadets sitting on the bed, talking, serious talking, mentoring, counseling, and never touching, period. And we'll get into the regulations because aside from how sad it is from a personal standpoint, it's downright evil from an administrative, leadership, professional, and legal standpoint. Because, and this is what just blows the mind, the actions that Zara did engage in that night, perceived by one other cadet to be inappropriate, were not defined as sexual misconduct by the laws of the academy, the regulations of the Corps of Cadets. I mean, get your head wrapped around that. I don't know what to say. I mean, and we live in a lawful society? Are you kidding me? There is no law here. Moreover, and if that didn't blow your mind, Zara's actions that night were in fact completely supported by the regulations, as she, as an upperclassman, is specifically charged in the regulations with, quote, looking after the lower class, end quote. And I'll explain in detail that with documentation later. But this is the fraud and the malfeasance of this entire issue. They, in a sense, convicted her of 1, sexual misconduct without any evidence of a sexual or intimate relationship, but based solely on the indoctrinated and parodied colloquial misunderstanding that sexual misconduct is being, quote, on the same horizontal surface, end quote. And I'll get to that in more detail later. But that's a phrase that Zara specifically states and refers to multiple times during her hearing, and additionally, to which the douchebag captain in charge doesn't skip a beat. Correct, consider, investigate, detail further, I mean right past him. I mean, it's clear at this hearing that his mind is made up. It wasn't a hearing to discern the truth, but to coerce Zara's admittance. And we'll get into that too coming up. But then, number 2, of sexual misconduct for nothing sexual, when the very regulation, the law, if you will, specifically and unambiguously defines sexual misconduct as having a sexual nature. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And it's just so sad. It's so sad that Zara had to go through this in the name of our country. I mean, we have a cancer, and the officers presiding and overseeing all this are cancerous human beings. I don't even blame the cadets involved per se. I mean, what role models do they have to aspire to and to demonstrate honor and character? Don't mistake what this situation demonstrates in a larger context. We do not live in a society of law and order. We live in a thug world of title and position and the debatable, figure it out in court after the fact, perception of legitimate authority. I don't have the words. So a cadet investigation is launched, and this is an investigation in every sense of the word, gathering evidence, talking to witnesses, etc. But there is no evidence of any sexual relationship. There can't be. There wasn't one. But what there is are children. And believe me, the academy thinks and treats the cadets as children. I mean, until they magically step across that graduation bridge and are handed their diplomas and commissions, then they're competent adults and, by God, Coast Guard officers. But until then, they're children. I'm not exaggerating here. But these children do have their own perceptions of what may have been happening or what they heard or what another cadet said. I mean, the rumor mill isn't just an aphorism, it's real. But look, there wasn't a single piece of evidence. And Zara's side did get to see the evidence against her. That wasn't purely hearsay. He said that she said. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's the stuff of narcissistic, idiot children who wouldn't know critical thinking if it was shoved up their backside. And that brings up another point. These children, these indoctrinated children, are also complete yes sir cadets. I mean, I have the audio of Zara's hearing where this douchebag captain presiding questions a witness who, and I'm not exaggerating, spoke on nothing but perception, witnessing absolutely nothing. I mean, I hear myself. It sounds nuts. And it is. I mean, this is right out of Alice in Wonderland. It's disgusting. And he questions this witness with absolutely leading questions. Hell, leading monologues, if you will. Blah, 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 blah. Is that not a lack of respect, first class cadet? Yes, sir, it is. These child investigators created an investigation, and it seems to be about a single night in mid-January when Zara was counseling the fourth class in the same room with the other fourth class roommate sitting 8 feet away at her desk on the other side, the parallel side of the room, doing her homework, who at some point saying she has to leave for a few minutes to get some homework help, and then after a time returns with another cadet, but not the on-duty cadet. Another black Genesis Council cadet. And Zara is found up on the lofted bed talking with her charge, to which this cadet responds, the situation, quote, doesn't look good, end quote. Now, why this particular cadet comes back with the roommate, we don't even know. Moreover, what is this idea that just because Zara's on the bed, there's something that doesn't look good? I mean, there's that perception again. And here's the thing. The regulations specifically allow cadets to sit on the same bed. So what does that even say for the colloquial misunderstanding of being on the same horizontal surface? I mean, this is all just so much bullshit. And it's certainly not backed up by the law, the regulations. And in addition to who this cadet even is and why she's there, why is there such a consideration, such importance placed on perception? I mean, that's one of the major problems. I mean, they literally live by the aphorism, perception is reality. But, most people grow out of that by the time they're adults. But perception is most definitely not reality. But even the Coast Guard leadership, the officers, seem to live by this aphorism. Yet what about actual reality? What about truth? Nobody gives a fuck what you're actually doing. It's how does it look? I mean, no shit. There's a story where Zara and one of her classmates, I think they were second classes, same year, juniors. They're in the firstie lounge. Well, maybe they were firsties. Maybe this was because they were in the firstie lounge. And while they were in the firstie lounge, this same fourth class she's been counseling, this girl in this room, walks by, and the girl she's with, the cadet she's with, another firstie, says hello to her and says, come here, I want to show you my pictures from winter break or whatever it was. And she invites her in. Now, a fourth class isn't supposed to be hanging out in the firstie lounge, but these kids kind of know how to bend the rules, it's so difficult, right? It's so nuanced. Is it a rule? Is it a law? Is it hard and fast? Is it flexible? For whatever reason, I guess, let's just say that the fourthie isn't supposed to go in there, but if she's invited in, right? But firsties and fourthies aren't really supposed to have too much casual time together. But come on, this is a 24/7 military college. It's difficult. So anyway, but Zara's not involved. Zara's just sitting next to her firstie friend, classmate, both seniors. And it just so happens that this fourth class walks through, and the other girl, because they've all known one another, Zara's roommate, another first class, also happened to come in at that time at some point. She goes to the other side, makes herself a coffee, goes back to her room. Later on, when they're done, Zara goes back to her room, and she is actually told by her roommate, hey, listen, that was wrong. You shouldn't have done that. It doesn't look good. That's it. It doesn't look good. No idea what's being done. No idea what legitimate reason you might have for talking with that fourth class. It simply doesn't look good. This is how indoctrinated these kids are. And they're not going to make decisions for themselves. I mean, I can't believe we call this a leadership school. I can't believe they talk about training leaders. They're not training leaders. They're training robots. These people don't lead. They learn the fucking manual and they follow. And that's exactly what ended up happening with Zara anyway, because we found out recently that guess what? The admiral up at headquarters that denied Zara's appeal is the classmate of the admiral of the Coast Guard Academy. They're buddies. I'll get into some of that detail later. But anyway, so the roommate returns with this other cadet. Hey, this doesn't look good. To which Zara and the fourth class agree. They're done anyway, so it'll be solved on its own, and that was that. No harm, no foul. And look, it's not like the cadets don't always have minor, subjective, debatable issues within the quote-unquote regulations all the time, but most of these issues are just immediately fixed right there on the spot, and this was just that occasion. Only somehow a month later, and after the roommates were struggling with their own problems together, and I'll get into that in the detail, Zara's just notified out of the blue that she's been put on report. And in the words of the first class shipmate she reached out to for explanation, quote, she should have stopped, end quote. But in Zara's mind, stopped what? And this investigation then broadens to this idea that there was an ongoing, inappropriate, then sexual or intimate relationship, which, by the way, is absolutely clear in the regulations, is not appropriate or authorized. You are not allowed to have relationships with the fourth class. I mean, Zara would have to be a complete moron to be so in love, so enamored with some freshman girl, to be actually engaged in such activity. Not to mention the fact that she'd have to be gay. But none of this is true. And none of it matters. Only the perceptual consensus matters. I mean, this is beyond disgusting. This is evil. This is, I don't have bad enough words for this. And these officers in charge, these subhumans they don't deserve to share our air. They are a cancer. But this investigation through this douchebag captain, the commandant of cadets, ultimately responsible both as the commissioned officer of cadets, but as an adult, a mentor, leader, etc., takes the investigation results and moves it on to a full administrative hearing. All this despite the fact that both Zara and the fourth class are vehemently denying that their interaction was in any way sexual, let alone physical, intimate, or in any way even close to that, or the commonly understood meaning of that. Fuck! I don't know how this douchebag captain, this black affirmative action captain, took the totality of the bullshit, fraud, rumor, perception, and complete lack of anything even resembling evidence, direct corroborating evidence, and decided to proceed. I have my opinions, judgments, and I think it's racist. I absolutely think this douchebag is a racist subhuman. And I think he was an opportunistic cunt of absolutely zero character who stood behind his black gang of cadet thugs who decided one more chance to fuck a white guy, or a white girl in this case. That's the only way to understand. This guy, this captain, you wait till you hear some of the audio. This guy is human cancer, living behind title and position and willing to do anything, regardless of the truth or facts, simply by nature of his perceived, or more ugly, the shared consensus of his authority by virtue of his position. But there's no actual thinking here, no principle, no intellect. And we'll listen to parts of the hearing. It's disgusting. Besides his affirmative action speech bordering on ebonics, this from an 06, not really a junior officer any longer. It's laughable. The hearing was only going to go one way, his way. And listening to it, you could hear it. It's nothing but a coercive inquisition meant only to get Zara to admit But these douchebags are the very ones who trained her, who indoctrinated her. And thank God she at least says it. When he finally gets her to admit to the lack of respect charge in this case, she says about the sexual misconduct, she actually refers back to that because she's starting to fight back a little bit, because she's starting to understand that this is a joke. She actually says that she felt she had to admit to the sexual misconduct because of the position of being on the same horizontal service. I mean, thank God she at least said that, because he just coerces this admittance, literally, like the hearing isn't going to end. But again, she tries to fight back a little, and that's why she says that key phrase. And it is, in fact, the only reason she admits, because that was the indoctrination. And here's the thing. It's not in the fucking regulations. They convicted, in a sense, my daughter for sexual misconduct, for not only behavior in which she did not participate, but against the very laws, if you will, the regulations as written. And the fucking douchebag cunt Admiral Noonan up at headquarters, she just signs off on it. And it's incredible. She actually refers to the regulations as part of her reasoning. Yet our lawyers looked at it and agreed. There's nothing in the regulations that would define there as actual behavior as sexual misconduct. I mean, you can't make this shit up. We are now so far down the rabbit hole, it feels like we'll never see the sun. And Zara is the one suffering through this. I mean, how much harder can you hope for a Mad Max-like world? It's just sad. So let me get into some of the details, and what we'll do is we'll look at the actual documentation, and I can prove everything I've said. I mean, I can prove it. And we'll get into that next.